Hi, I'm James Davis, founder and CEO of Touchdown Strategies, and welcome to Game Plan. We're going to talk about event-based media strategies, and we have a big one coming. Just next week, we'll see in Milwaukee the Republican convention kickoff, and then following that, we'll have the Democratic convention. There is no bigger event than the conventions, especially in the political world. But even outside the political world, Republican or Democratic conventions rank high on the list. Only the Olympics has more credentialed members of the media. We have 15,000 plus credentialed members of the media. It is a spectacle, organized chaos at its best. And today to talk with me, I have former communications director Mark Pfiefle. He ran the 2004 convention in New York City and has a long history of convention work. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. This is a big week, a big month indeed.
Well, we're going to go a little bit about, we're going to start just a little with your experience. And we've seen you 2004, we're in 2024. I mean, you talked up to me earlier about how your t-shirt, I have my convention t-shirt on from 2012 where I ran the convention in Tampa. And you said yours was in the Smithsonian.
Yes.
So conventions have changed quite a bit since then.
They have. We did. So in 2000, for example, it was the first convention that was ever broadcast on the web in Philadelphia for the Republicans. We were before the Democrats. And at that
Thank you, Al Gore.
Yeah, that's the phrase we used, is watch the Republican convention on Al Gore's invention. And we bought ads in the Rush Limbaugh show. This is how long ago this was. And at that point, after the broadcast, we were the second highest viewed web program ever in the history of the internet. Number one was the Victoria's Secret runway show, which probably we still couldn't beat today. But that's kind of the progression, and that's one of the things about these events is always be ready for that next technological thing. That next thing that you can do to highlight the convention. Because then in 2004, for the Republican convention, we did the first ever Bloggers Alley or Internet Row, because then there was this fancy thing called blogs coming in. And so it brought a whole new thing. And the convention planners were like, wait, we already do Radio Row. Now you want a whole nother area to do the internet and bring this new fangled thing in? Now it's podcasts, right? That's the new thing. Radio Row is kind of terrestrial radio is kind of unfortunately kind of moving to the back page, and now we're all about this new podcasts and iTunes and whatnot. So,
well, now they call it Media Row. So we'll have a number of our staff members on Media Row there in Milwaukee next week, booking guests and getting them out to talk about policy issues that they care about, and where they hope the next, where they really hope the presidential debates and conversation goes in terms of the issues. Like, I know one of the key things that I would start with any convention, any major event. If you want to have a successful event, you've got to start with the message. What is the message? Mm-hmm. And so we start with the overall message, and then each day of the conventions typically have a message of the day. Do you remember the message of the day from 2004?
So message of the day in New York, kind of with what the main message was in the prime time, and we try and echo that all day. So message number one was education, and we talked about the First Lady and her priorities. Then it was the Vice President, his speech, his day, and then third is the President himself or the presidential nominee. So you're kind of moving through that, and you're doing national security, you're doing domestic issues, and you're trying every day within the halls and within the area to move that message so that you're keeping reporters and the delegates busy. Because if they're not busy, unfortunately, left to their own devices, they're finding sub-stories in there. There's a part of the platform that is controversial, or this delegate did something stupid or something like that. So what we were trying to do at one point, for example, in 2012 in your convention, we wanted to go behind the scenes. right? So we wanted to take reporters behind the stage and show them all this. It's like the Wizard of Oz. We're going to show behind the screen. And in doing that, that was the first time that had ever been done at a Republican convention. And you have all sorts of things going on, little secrets. You have people that are, high-profile surrogates that are practicing their convention speeches. And so we said, we're bringing these major reporters and cameras behind the scenes. And when we finally took like ABC News, Jonathan Karl, and these other really prominent journalists back there. And one of the gatekeepers, this nice woman who every 4 years she controls who gets access to this, she pretty much burned down. I haven't heard somebody that angry before or since. Ma'am, if you're listening or watching right now, I apologize. And we just kind of soldiered through. And we got some good reports out of it. So here's what you want. You want one of two things. Either reporters very happy, or you want what happened in 2004, which was also from ABC News, Ted Koppel. So he shows up, spends a day or so with us, and just says, there's no news going on here. It's so manipulated and controlled, and it's just my message and move it through. And Ted Koppel from ABC just said, crew, we're leaving. We're going back to D.C. And I was like, okay.
Well, thanks for 2012, because I got reamed out for that. It made a spectacular segment where we got our messages out really clearly, and that's really the goal for the convention. My family spent about a year in Tampa putting that convention together, and your whole focus is on how do you maximize the media opportunities that exist. And we broke it down even into a mathematical equation of like, we have this many shows, they're going to take this many guests, these are the surrogates that we have, how do we map and place them in the right place at the right time, who is the backup in case that person doesn't show up, they get held up, maybe they get picked as the vice presidential pick. All of these things you're kind of swirling around and moving at the same time, and you're getting requests from the media, and the media is also sending those requests to the campaign and the RNC, and it is organized chaos to say the least. But that night, I got reamed out by our director of operations for breaking protocol and having someone go backstage. And the CEO, Bill Harris, came after me as well and gave me a nice talking to with Mike Miller, who is a wonderful man, has done 13 conventions, which is legendary. And then afterwards, Bill pulled me to the side and said, hey, you know what? That was a really good segment. Keep up the good work. So he got the joke, but he was also, making sure he kept me in line with the rest of the team. So thank you for getting me screamed at. It won't be the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time in our relationship. What other challenges did you have leading up to building this massive infrastructure to get these messages out?
So we had a couple of things. One thing was, so we were in Madison Square Garden, and right above us was the ABC News radio headquarters, and Sean Hannity broadcast a show from right upstairs. And our goal was, how do we get Sean Hannity away from his studio and onto Radio Row? So the Radio TV Correspondents Association, the House and Senate TV Correspondents Association, they usually run, the galleries of where all the media was. And they put Sean Hannity way out somewhere where nobody would see him. So we took Sean down to see his area, and he said, nope, I'm staying up in my studio in Penn Plaza. And he said, now if I could go right there, which was a primo spot, which was like Air America or something else was in that spot, that's where I would host my show. So I had to figure out, okay.
It wasn't just that, though. He wanted a platform built, right?
It was like
an
area
built above everyone else.
He's the number one show in the world, so wouldn't you want? And he's right upstairs, and he reaches 20 million people at that point. So we moved him there, and that was chaos again. That was another Bill Harris has to get involved. And again, I had to beg, borrow, and plead for forgiveness, because it's like, I need him there because we want him part of the program, broadcasting 3 hours a day. from the floor of the convention area. So, yeah, again, another one, that's where I got yelled at.
So that's the thing. You mentioned Bill Harris. He was the CEO of the convention in New York. He was the CEO of the convention there in Tampa. He was part of the McCain floor operation in 2008 when I was the deputy for the convention there. These are such unique events that they tend to get the same people who come back, because if you get that experience, it's unlike anything else in the political world. I think it actually translates really well for what we do, what you do for your company, what I do with Touchdown Strategies, to work with clients, at the Consumer Electronics Show, or when we put together an event with the NFL and the Super Bowl, and really trying to highlight things, because it's similar kind of challenges, those big events and lots of different stakeholders. How do you manage it? How do you get your message out and put your spokespeople in a place where they can win?
And one of the things I learned from Bill Harris and from others was just, it's almost like diplomacy. You get thrown into an area, and this is going to be your platform for 1 week at some point in a summer, and you integrate yourself into their community. You're the outsider going in, and yes, you're doing a very high-profile event, but you've got to understand that there's already political challenges going on in that area. So, for example, when we went to New York City, we're going into an area where Mike Bloomberg is the current mayor. The former mayor is Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor at that point, right after 9/11. Also very helpful to us and endorsing the president was former Democratic mayor Ed Koch. Then you add Republican governor. This is when you actually had Republicans in New York State, George Pataki. Now, all these guys have their own egos, their own staffs, their own priorities, their own legacies, they want to be in prime time as well, some point in a real nice area. And it got to be almost like the 4 or 5 of these different high, big, important people fighting over, okay, so you're giving me 7 minutes at 6:15, and you're giving Rudy Giuliani 22 minutes at 9:45. And so what I saw from Bill Harris and from Kevin Sheekey and all of these people, so Kevin was the head of the local organizing organization, and you have to just treat everybody with such care and listen and moderate and find ways, because that's the way your event is going to be successful. And it's the same thing if you're doing an Olympics or you're doing a Super Bowl or whatever it is. You just have to be careful of your community and make sure that you listen to all the entities and take their perspectives into consideration.
I think that's a critical skill that you learn from having to do these conventions. That diplomacy aspect plays well when you're talking about integrating across public affairs teams, government affairs teams, the legal team, the investor relations team, your CEO, the stakeholders, customers, employees. I mean, we have to do that a lot in our day-to-day jobs these days, and so I think convention was a great training ground for that. My experience in convention was a little bit different than I think most conventions, in the sense that most conventions you get a liaison from the campaign, particularly on the comm side, and they come in and they are like a bull in a china shop. You've been working on it for a year, so you're totally invested in what you're doing, and they just wrestle you to the ground, beat you to death, and it can be really tough for a lot of folks. And in 2008, we had Adam Mendelson, who is a delightful person. It didn't come off that way during the convention, but he came in. He wanted to make his impression on the event overall and show that he had control over what was going on. In 2012, I had a guy named Jim Dyke, who came in from the campaign. Now, the great thing about Jim Dyke is he had been there, done that, seen it. He wasn't trying to prove himself, and he came in. He looked at our communications plan, which is really an iteration of the communications plan that you built in 2004. We just keep iterating. I mean, that's the goal. How do we continue to improve upon lessons learned and going back and asking the last team, what did you do well? How do we make it better next time? And that's what we did. And so when we had this plan ready in Tampa and Jim Dyke comes in, and I didn't really know him before, he said, wow, this is fantastic. Great job. call me if you need me. And so that was a very different atmosphere than I think in 2008, where you had, campaign person coming in really heavy handed. What was it like for you? Because you had the White House, you had the RNC.
So I had a situation where there was a communications director, Jim Wilkinson, and the war in Iraq was
firing real bullets
raging
around here
Yes.
with Jim Wilkinson. Yeah.
The war in Iraq and Afghanistan were raging, full bore. So they blew a call into Jim Wilkinson and said, Jim, you got to come back and run the National Security Council communications. And then there was an opening for the convention communications job. And I interviewed with the White House and with the campaign with Nicole Wallace, now MSNBC, Nicole as well, and kind of got their blessing. So I had kind of worked out a lot of that at the beginning of it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't entities that are always, essentially you have like 5 bosses. You have boss number 1, and most important is day-to-day is Bill Harris. Then you have Kevin Sheekey, who's kind of a quasi-boss, who runs the host committee, who essentially funds everything. And he's the mayor's consigliere, so you got to listen, and you will listen to him. Very talented guy. Then you have the White House, so Dan Bartlett and Karl Rove. So how many bosses is that right now? Now you have Nicole Wallace, and I also had Jim Dyke at the Republican National Committee. So I've got about 5 or 6 bosses who I have to correspond with and talk to, run things past, and make sure that everything is okay and ready to go. And so that's one aspect of it, is that realize that when you are doing this large type event, that you're going to have different people that have different equities, different time that they can commit to helping you, and know when to pull those levers of when you need help and assistance. That's a very important thing to learn. If I needed something from the campaign, I would call Nicole Wallace and Ken Mellman. If I needed something from the RNC, I had to call Jim Dyke. If I needed something from New York City, I could call Kevin Sheekey. So you have all these things. Utilize all these capabilities that you have and make sure that you nurture your relationships with these folks, because when it gets really hard, when unexpected things happen, which is going to happen. We had all sorts of news stories when you're in the heart of the media like New York City, and you've got the New York Times and the New York Post and the Daily News and all of these stations digging around for news, plus the National Press Corps. It means that at any point there's going to be some sort of a story coming out that could cast aspersions against your organization and against your event.
So a big convention like this is really like organizing, a 500,000 person wedding party with an angry bride and
Yes.
bridal party, right? I mean, people are coming in, they've got a little angst on them because they're working so hard on these campaigns, and they're just in the grind day in and day out. And so it feels like the weight of the world is on them. And I think part of what I learned from observing, others do it really well, including, yourself and Matt Burns, who I worked with in 2008. You just say, that's great, happy to do it. You roll with the punches. You make the changes you need to in areas where you feel really strongly about it. You just keep doing what you're doing, because the convention's happening, whether people like it or not. The show is going to go off.
Right.
And I think that's the way it is for most big events. The show happens.
It happens, and a couple of things are going to happen. Number one is, and especially in days like this, is there's going to be protests, right? So First Amendment, I hope there's protests. I hope that people are vigorously utilizing their First Amendment for free expression. And so that is going on. And especially in these conventions with all the challenges in Gaza and Israel and Palestine, and then you have kind of the usual kind of undercurrent of challenges in our society. That I think that's something that both of these conventions, both in Chicago, because that's an unknown factor too right now, and in Milwaukee, are going to have to think about. And we thought about it in New York, and this is one thing, if you are protesting at these conventions, watch over your shoulder, because they're going to try and infiltrate these protest movements. And in New York, that is what happened, is that the NYPD put people into the protest movement to monitor what they were doing, so they knew what was going to happen. So one of the things that they were planning on doing, that the protesters were planning on doing, was they were going to get the the police to charge against the protesters. And then the protesters were going to throw marbles onto the street and get the police to trip as they're coming. And NYPD knew exactly when that was going to happen. So when the protesters had that moment, all the police just stopped, and the marbles went right past their feet. It's that type of organization that you try and put together. Now, I'm not saying that that's a good thing necessarily, but it's those type of activities that are going on behind the scenes all the time that both people that are exercising their First Amendment rights to protest and the people that are putting these events together have to think about. And then in the world that we live in right now, like if you look at what's going on in NATO, they've got these national security fences set up all over Washington, D.C. These fences are immediately going to be moved to Milwaukee as well, and then to Chicago, because it's that same possibility. You've got to be ready for any type of a terrorist type attack or anything else. These turn into national security special events.
Exactly, and having to work with the Secret Service throughout to coordinate. In my case, a little bit different. You wouldn't think this, but in 2008, we were in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we got interrupted by a hurricane. Who would have thought we were going to get interrupted by a hurricane in Minneapolis, St. Paul? The reality is we had Hurricane Gustav, who was barreling up the coast and coming into Louisiana and parts of Texas. And when you're throwing a big celebration for who your nominee is going to be, and you have all these delegates coming in around the country and all this media, and the spotlight is on you, it seems a little tone deaf to be celebrating when people are standing in harm's way. And so we immediately had to make some changes there at the convention. In fact, McCain went out. I was on an interview, I believe I was going back and forth with Josh Earnest at the time, who was a spokesman for the Obama campaign. And I was on an interview, and they asked me, a radio interview, I think Steve Malzberg, and they asked me to respond to the fact that McCain had just come out and said we were going to cancel the convention. Now, the reality is there's a business aspect, as you know, to the convention that most people don't understand. It's about getting the delegate counts and getting the official nomination so that you can appear on the ballot. If you don't do that, if you don't have a certain number of delegates show up and you get the quorum that necessary and get the votes, you don't appear on the ballot in states. And so we had to do that. So we couldn't cancel the convention. So here I was in this awkward position going on the air, and I had to say, actually, we can't cancel the convention. We're not canceling the convention. We're going to cancel some activities around the convention. So I was directly in opposition to John McCain, which was a little wild. And we had to go back and forth with the campaigns. Maria Sino was the CEO there of the 2008 convention, and she had to really go in and lean in and say, I'm sorry, this is what we have to do. So what we did from a PR perspective and from a humanity perspective, honestly, because being a good human is often good PR. We immediately took all the volunteers that we had, hundreds, if not thousands of volunteers, and we started packaging up goods to send down to the Gulf Coast for relief efforts. And we started doing interviews to dispatch Americans to do the same. How do you help your neighbors? And that actually became a really good thing for our convention overall. If you fast forward to Tampa, we saw another hurricane, and they said, "Hey, it's never going to be a hurricane." Yeah, I know. I remember standing on top of the building and doing stand-up TV shows. My hair's all blowing and stuff, and it's a great visual. But and they're talking about the hurricane, and I'm having to coordinate with the governor. I'm having to coordinate with the Secret Service. We're having to coordinate with the mayor. We're having to coordinate with all across these various entities to make sure that we know what the heck's going on. We're talking to NOAA in real time about what's going on and the monitoring of it. I guess I say all that because you have to plan for the unexpected.
Be ready for the unexpected.
Because we never would have guessed. In fact, they ran the data when they chose Tampa, because Tampa's no stranger to hurricanes, but they ran the data and they said that, Tampa never has hurricanes during this part of the year. But going off my previous experience in Minnesota, I said neither did Minnesota. And so we were able to build a contingency plan and then act on it quickly.
That's so important. Yeah, we had a not quite as big of a challenge of that. We had a thing called Flippergate. So Flippergate was there was a young Republican National Committee staffer dressed up as a dolphin, as Flipper, who would follow John Kerry around, and they wanted to bring Flipper to New York City. So at that point, former First Lady, then New York Senator Hillary Clinton, was doing Sunday shows at the Garden at our facility. And we decided in all of our brilliance that we would put Flipper to greet Mrs. Clinton as she entered Madison Square Garden and the Republican National Committee perimeter. The Secret Service did not exactly enjoy seeing a young staffer in a Flipper costume waving and moving towards the First Lady, former of the United States of America, and arrested this young gentleman, and he spent some time in a New York City holding cell. And the Secret Service came by to ask me what I knew about Flipper. Did I flip Flipper to get to the flipping Madison Square Garden to flip off Mrs. Clinton? Yes, a difficult situation when you're trying to put on a convention. So my advice would be just say no to people in costumes greeting your opponents when they come into your facility. Just say hi. The difference was when Michael Moore showed up, then later that week during one of the prime times, I just said, come on in, Michael. Can I get you a cup of coffee? Can I get you a cheeseburger? It looks like you wouldn't be the first time. And we just, with open arms, we just brought him through and then ushered him out at one point. So you learn from your mistakes.
We do hopefully learn from our mistakes. I think that is something that we can all exercise, a little humility in the work that we do, because we're dealing with people, and a lot of our work is about relationships, this judgment calls, and it's not always clear what the right answer is, but hopefully we can learn from them and get better answers every time. I know we talked about message a little bit, and I want to talk about the message that we think will come out of Milwaukee. What overarching message do you think you'll hear out of Milwaukee? Their overall theme is Make America Great Again. They have one day of Make America Safe, Make America Secure, and Make America Wealthy. I personally don't like the Make America Wealthy. It feels
very Trumpian.
I like prosperous or something along those lines. But that's what. So they're clearly hitting on foreign policy. They're clearly hitting on safety and public safety in our cities, and then they're clearly hitting on the Bidenflation and some of the topics there. What do you expect to hear the most out of this convention? What are the overriding narratives?
So there's a couple of things, and this is always a discussion within a convention, is how much of it do you use to contrast? Meaning you want some of your surrogates and some of your speakers to just go after your opponent. In Chicago, they're going to want some of their speakers just going after Trump and the Trump ticket and the Republicans mercilessly. Then you want your positive messaging. So you want somebody saying, here's the things that we want to do that are going to improve American lives, are going to make it more secure, are going to help our prosperity. So you're always kind of fighting that desire. Now, the politicians, they love to punch. But what I would always fight for is that how do we get some proactive, good messages out there? End of the day, it's like people hear all this critique and all this contrast and all this beating up on your political opponents. But what's going to inspire people? And that's where we had people like Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2004 get up and, yes, he gave the I'll be back or, that type of a thing in kind of his catchphrases. But he told his inspirational story about how he became an American and how he became involved in politics. And he was then the sitting governor of California. And he kind of rose above, kind of politics in a way. It's kind of this great American story and movie star. So it's the more you can put those types of people and those kind of messages together, so it's not just another, screed against your opponent, I think is important.
Yeah, I think we ran up against that in Tampa for sure, because the predominant idea from the campaign at the time was that we needed to prosecute the case against Barack Obama. And ultimately, we wound up winning out the convention staff because Bill Harris, who had been around so long at so many conventions, and Mike Miller and others, we wound up saying, like, we have to make the case for Mitt Romney as a viable alternative because no one's talking about Mitt Romney. I felt a bit justified when I saw the Netflix special come out and everyone saying, wow, this was like, these are the kinds of things, the convention, the Netflix special are the kinds of things that would have actually made us like Mitt Romney a little bit more, would have caused voters to make a different choice. But that was a challenge. I mean, that's
right.
A constant battle of like contrast versus positive vision versus just negative in terms of your opponent. One of the iconic moments of the 2012 convention, which everyone will talk about for forever, is I particularly, this is my vantage point, was in the comms office. I decide I'm going to go down to the floor and watch some speeches, and I go down to the floor just in time for Clint Eastwood's speech, and I look out, and Clint Eastwood is talking to an empty chair, and this empty chair was supposed to be Obama, and I was wondering, like, how did this happen? This was one of the few speeches that did not get pre-approved. And that was, a campaign decision. They said, no, we have Clint Eastwood, we're going to go out with it. And then apparently Clint Eastwood saw a chair right behind the the curtain right before he went out. And he said, hey, can you give me that? And so staffer just handed him a chair, and he did it impromptu out there.
So Clint Eastwood, not known for his improvisational techniques, a great actor, but maybe he was trying out a new thing. I mean, he was what? He was a young man at that point. What is he, like 80-something at that point? Yeah. So
well, I freaked out because, these conventions, the speeches are so scripted, and they're rehearsed and practiced and so on. But this one wasn't, and I thought, I don't think this is going to come off well. So I ran back up to the control room so I could look at the screen and the monitor, and it clearly was not
so
translating
one
to
of the
camera.
James Davis touchdown strategy rules is preview what the people are going to say at your big event beforehand. You don't have to look at every word and at every apostrophe and comma, but just know that they're not going to grab a chair on the way to the stage.
Absolutely. I mean, preparation is key, and we talk about that a lot with our clients. Just understanding who are we talking to, what are our messages, what are we trying to achieve. We go through that process over and over again, and I know we sound like a broken drum sometimes, but I think it's necessary because if you don't, it's easy to deviate a bit. A couple other things that I just want to hit real quick is a second key that I would highlight for conventions is the audience that's there. You got to build energy in the audience that's there. So if we have the message and we cascade that message throughout, and everyone down to the janitor should know what our message is, what we're saying. And I think that's true for companies, that's true for coalitions and nonprofits. The more we can articulate our vision and our message so that others can repeat it, the better position we're going to be to succeed.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely true. So at a big convention, for example, you have your delegate breakfasts every morning. Every state and territory, they all gather somewhere, usually near where their hotel is, where they're staying, and they have a morning breakfast. And that's your time to kind of reinforce your message of the day. They'll have speakers, and you'll talk to all your delegates. So essentially, we're all getting the message every morning as we're eating our bagel and we're having our blueberry muffin and coffee. That's important. Then you have some sort of a delivery mechanism for just a very simple, 4 bullets or something. There's only so much time.
The messaging cards.
Your messaging card.
You guys
and
pioneered that.
Make it so that you can, now it's so that you'd have it on your smartphone, but at that point it was more of something you could put in your breast pocket or something that you could put in your pocketbook as well. And you could keep it and refer back to it and kind of have that, because all these delegates are going to be doing media with their local affiliates, their local radio stations, local outlets and that sort of thing. So you're keeping that going. And then it's kind of finding ways to get that message through every day, at every moment. So we would do like a kickoff press conference where we'd preview the message, and we would have people like bring one of the program speakers from prime time and have them prep the press corps as well, so that you're getting as many impressions as you can, especially as stovepiped or as different the media is today, whereas everybody's watching their little outlet, getting their information through their media stream. You got to find a way to get inside that media stream and make a difference.
And that sort of bridges into our third key, which is positioning everyone to be an ambassador for your message, to be a surrogate for your message, so that they can articulate it cleanly to diverse audiences across all mediums, all platforms. And when you're looking at all the media that's there, I mean, you got 15,000 credentialed members of the media. It takes a little bit of mapping to get those things out. That's really the whole job. That's why you work for a year to put together that 1 week where you're on the world stage. It's a wild experience.
And to do that, my suggestion would be cast a wide net. You want to find new and different people that are going to become your messengers. Just like, look, we're always after whoever our organization is. We want to get our equivalent of Clint Eastwood, right? So find out who those people are, and that's kind of the search for the surrogate. And so that's one of the things that we did very early is we would go and meet. I would go to concerts, and I would go to Caroline's Comedy, and I'd try and meet some of the people that were coming through town. Some are, they're partisan on the other side. But I would find one. Like, I went to a concert one night with Frank, who was doing a lot of the celebrity outreach, and we met John Oresnik from Five for Fighting. And so we had like great seats. We met him after the concert. He wanted to participate, and we thought he could do his Superman song this would have been huge. But it's too partisan. I think his manager didn't like the idea, but we at least tried. The other thing we tried to do was we tried to get Daryl Hammond from Saturday Night Live, because we wanted him to do the, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Republican National Convention in New York City, the intro to Saturday Night Live. We wanted him to do the voiceover and maybe do it live. He was all for it. Not because he's a partisan political person, but because he thought it would be an interesting kind of fun thing to do. And he's an American, and he's very pro-President of the United States. And I think it went up to Lorne Michaels, and Lorne Michaels said, Daryl, no. You are not going to do that. That's too partisan, and we're Democrats over here. So, but we tried. Here's what we were trying not to do, and I'm going to sound a little bit off key when I say this, but we had set a goal of not having Lee Greenwood sing "I'm proud to be an American," because every Republican convention since way back, since Nixon, had been playing some version of this. And Lee Greenwood, great American, love you, Lee Greenwood. I stand up and salute, and the hair on my arm goes up a little bit when I listen to that song. But it was our goal that, can we please have somebody new? Now, he's still probably going to be in this convention singing "I'm proud to be an American." But that's the goal, is to let's get some new people in, some new faces. And at one point, like in 2000, we saw that Sade, a female blues singer, was performing nearby. So we called Sade's agent, and we just paid a fee, and she came and performed. Now, she's not a Republican, she's not a Democrat, but money talks. And so, I mean, there's different ways that you can bring new people in that we were looking for. Cast that wide net so you have more people talking about your issues.
Well, I think, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, having a convention in your city, it's the front row to American civics and participation. I mean, it is a true American value. I know our country has some challenges talking across political aisles and stuff, and we can tackle that in another episode because that is a major issue. But what we tried to do in Tampa was we tried to talk to the local business owners and share with them kind of the value of having the convention there. And I know we do that a little bit everywhere. We pivoted to it hard, mostly out of necessity. I got a call from a New York Times reporter, and I was rushing into another meeting. I didn't know who it was. And a reporter calls me and says, "Oh, this is so-and-so from the New York Times." Very professional, introduced herself, made sure that she was a reporter right off the bat. And she said, "We've noticed that Tampa is the sex club capital of the country. What are you going to do with 60,000 Republicans descending on Tampa?" And kind of stunned, because as a spokesperson, I don't want to talk about sex clubs and the Republican Party and what we're going to do and the economic benefit to sex clubs in Tampa. It was just a little far for me. I don't think my wife would appreciate me talking about that a lot
We're all for
either.
economic development.
Well, so my response was, this is going to be the most exciting convention in our history. And with a wink and a nod, she understood. That was as far as I was going to go. I felt like it did a lot to really build a relationship, because a lot of times political comms people, they might just hang up the phone or no comment or whatever. And I don't think that's a good recipe for building long-term relationships. If you want transactional relationships, you can, but media relations, the heart of it is relationships, and they're just out doing a job. So it didn't take long. The Drudge Report was prominent back in the day, and if you remember the iconic siren at the top, this story popped on Drudge, and the lead quote was, "Davis says it's going to be an exciting convention." Instead of the siren, it had a stripper pole, which was like, whoa. So I thought really quickly, what are we going to do to get away from all these stories about like strip clubs in Tampa and start actually talking about building the convention, start building some positive momentum? And what we did was we found the local coffee shop people, and we talked to them and said, "Hey, I know you're excited about having the convention here. I know you want customers to come in. You think this is going to be good for you, and it will be. But if you wait till the convention to get media, you're going to drown in the onslaught of media. Now is the time to get it, and you can remarket it to people," which is a great concept to be able to do. And so I just started holding press conference every week with all these very diverse groups of people saying, "We're excited to have them here. They're great." They also gave me a few free lunches out of it.
That's important. Yes.
Not that I could use anymore, especially during the 2012, because you can pack on a few pounds during a campaign.
That's important, is take care of yourself and get some rest, because it is a long process, and just be ready for that 1 week. And yes, you're going to get a lot of invites to cool parties during the convention. Go to bed early, because like I would be the one, I would have to do the 6 a.m. interviews because everybody else wanted to stay out late. So you hit the bed by about 9 o'clock or so and get ready, because that alarm clock is going to go off very soon, very quickly.
Well, you're a much older comms director than me, so you went to bed much earlier. But
much older. But I'd watch Matlock and then go to bed.
But I remember Pam Stevens, who was there at the convention, running up to me one day, and she goes, "It's Wolf Blitzer. Talk to him." And I'm thinking, what am I going to say to Wolf? I'm going into a meeting. What does he have a question? No, he doesn't have a question. Just say hi and talk to him for a second. And it was such a brief conversation. "Hey, Wolf, it's James Davis. Look forward to welcoming you to the convention. If there's anything that you need, please reach out to me or Pam, and we'll be happy to help accommodate it. I look forward to talking to you a little bit later." And to your point, that little bit later, hard. I called Wolf. Wolf called me. And that's, don't get those calls every day anymore.
Right.
But at the moment, you're so slammed. What are you going to prioritize? Are you going to go to the meeting with the Secret Service to talk about how to keep everybody safe? Or are you going to sit there and chit chat on the phone with Wolf Blitzer?
That's right.
It's a balancing act.
So I think it's kind of like that from a communication standpoint. When you're doing a large event, is take the advantages that you have to do relationship building with those type of media people or whoever it might be, and because that's your one shot. Because what you'll do when you are doing a big event somewhere, you essentially get a key to the city, right? And because you're going to experience, and the city is going to be reaching out to you just like the businesses in Tampa were to you in 2012, and you're going to be able to do things and see things and meet people that you wouldn't otherwise, and grab that possibility. Because what happens is As soon as the balloons fall in a convention or whatever the big event is, the media starts picking up their cameras and taking them back to the trucks. Then the Teamsters are tearing down this elaborate stage that you've spent months and months putting together. And you're going, it's over? It's done?
Anyone who's ever put together a major event has had to feel that, because you have this euphoric climb where, everything is, the cameras, everything's pointing at you. The world is talking about everything that you're doing, every little move. And then
the Teamsters show up, they tear it down, and the Knicks are playing the next day.
It's like this little bit of sadness afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. That you just feel. It's an emotionally draining time for sure. So I know we only got a couple minutes left. I just want to get give me your funniest or riskiest move that you took as in the event communication space, either there or another event.
So in the 2000 convention for the Democrats, we were in Los Angeles, and we kind of infiltrated the other side, which I think is another thing to watch out for, is watch out for the other side to show up at your event. And we would go to the media area every morning, and this was in Pacific time, so it was like 3 a.m. when all the radio shows were just starting. They had to broadcast their morning drive radio across the country, and Chris Politz and I and Jim Nicholson would show up, suit, tie, ready to go.
Former Secretary Jim
Former
Nicholson.
Secretary
VA
of
Secretary.
VA. At that point, he was the Republican National Committee chairman. And 3 a.m., we would show up with our credentials, and we would do radio for 4 hours, and we were the only surrogates on Radio Row because nobody else wanted to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we were dead tired, the three of us. And at one point, we invited Dana Milbank from the Washington Post to tag along with us. Now, Dana Milbank, not a general fan of our endeavors, but he spent all day with us. And the chief of staff at the committee was like, "You're doing what? You have him up at 3 a.m.? You brought a Washington Post correspondent to have unfiltered access to you for an entire day? It's on you if it goes bad." Okay? So Chris and I, we do everything we can. The story comes out pretty well. Jim Nicholson, quite happy. We set what I think probably still stands as a convention record for most radio interviews done by one single surrogate. We did like 150 different interviews in that time with Chairman Nicholson. So it's like sometimes you have to go and experience and take some chances, go behind enemy lines or your opponent's world, take advantage of it and enjoy your time there.
Yeah, no, in 2008, when I served as a deputy for the convention, I wound up on Radio Row during the convention, and what a tremendous experience it was, and built some lifelong relationships. Reporters that I call to this day, Martha Zoller out of Georgia. Worked with her when we were working in the Pentagon doing the surge forces in Iraq, and getting out information about what we were trying to do in the Pentagon during that time. I worked with her at the convention, and that's just a lifelong relationship. I can call up Scott Hennon, and anytime in the world. Great folks. It is the relationships that you build with these media folks that really pay the dividends over the long haul.
That's right.
And so if there are younger comms people looking at this, I would say check it out. Try volunteering for a convention. If you get an opportunity to work on one, it's a heck of an endeavor. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. You'll have lifelong relationships when you've been in the foxhole with people for that long period of time. Even going back to 2008, I guess the funny story that I had was I was dating this young woman at the time, and we were doing this long-distance relationship. She was down at the University of Tennessee. We'd met when I was working for Secretary Rumsfeld, and we dated there, and then she went down to the University of Tennessee down in Knoxville, and we were doing this long-distance thing from Minneapolis to Knoxville. She was a journalism student, and we had made a big announcement from the convention that we were going to have the most tech-savvy convention in history. And we were using Ustream.tv with Brad Hunstable, great founder, veteran, great company, wonderful technology. He made a huge exit on. He's an incredible entrepreneur. But we made this announcement that we were going to live stream, and she got a pass from her teacher to skip class to write a story for the Sentinel on this particular announcement from the convention. Apparently, we did not give enough or clear enough instructions for Apple users, and she had a really tough time getting in there. It probably doesn't help that she was a little bit mad at me at the same time, but she wrote a scathing article. If you're going to be tech savvy, be tech savvy. This is why Republicans can't win. And I was like, whoa, it shows up in my clips report from, small paper, and I have to go in and explain to the CEO why my then girlfriend, now wife, wrote such a scathing article. Thankfully, Maria Sino was the CEO, and she was the godparent to Jim Carville and Mary Madeline's kids. So she understood that this public feud could happen.
Yes.
And so she gave me a bit of a pass and kind of laughed at it. But I was terrified of that moment. So anyway, and my wife's not one to hold back.
And five children later, it seems like it worked out in the end.
It did. But I think that goes to a point, though, as well. I mean, there's a communications lesson to be learned there. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, because even your biggest fans might hold you accountable for those things. Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you about the power of event-based comm strategies, and to pick your brain a little bit about convention history. And we look forward to seeing what's going to happen in Milwaukee and then ultimately Chicago. I'm not convinced in Chicago that we don't have a brokered convention, just like the last time Democrats were in Chicago.
I think it's a little nerve-wracking right now for convention planners in both places, but specifically in Chicago. If you have the protests, Palestine, Gaza protests, unknown around the nominee, put all that together, and plus it's Chicago, the history of Chicago and Democratic conventions. Very interesting, challenging month ahead for political and communication, crisis communication, and practitioners, but get involved. Become part of the process for your political party or organization, whatever it might be. It's really a learning environment that you can't do otherwise. There's no other example, unless you work for NBC and you're doing the Olympics this summer as well. This is the opportunity. So get involved, volunteer, be part of it.
Well, thank you again. I couldn't agree more, Mark Pfiefle. Thank you for joining our show today. Really appreciate your insights. Again, Mark Pfiefle, Off the Record Strategies, former comms director for the 2004 convention, and just an all-around good guy. We thank you for joining The Game Plan, and we hope to see you again soon.